Hello and welcome to another episode of Renaissance Botany. In this episode we'll cover the paper by Dr. Michael Perez, which talks about the exotic spices within the Czech islands, found in medieval dig sites dating back to the medieval and early Renaissance eras. This paper is a collection of all the data obtained from the Czech island dig sites, combined together and interpreted to create a cohesive explanation on what spices were available to the ancient Czech people, as well as a brief history of how the spices moved to Czechoslovakia. Let's begin. The earliest known studies of the varieties of spices available in Middle Ages and early Renaissance eras was based purely on written records. The oldest written record was Claret's Lexicon, which contained a Czech Latin list of spices. This document dates back to the latter half of the 14th century. During the 15th century, new medicines were being developed using different herbs and spices. During this time, the work of Dr. Matoy from 1596 rose to prominence and became a source of other herbs during the 15th century. Medieval and Renaissance cookbooks and recipes also contained information that could be used to derive what plants were available within Czechoslovakia during that era. Other sources that were less available but nonetheless valuable were receipts and catalogs detailing the prices and expenses of different spices in aristocratic courts. Unfortunately, no such receipts have been found within common folk locations, at least in the archaeological record. The last source of written information would be travel logs, and different catalogs for merchandise, and little tiny artifacts lettered here and there. During the second half of the 19th century, attempts at using plant fossils to figure this stuff out occurred. The first known individual to do so was Dr. Lessner, who created two papers documenting the plant material in 1859 and 1865. This was followed by Dr. Jettels of 1872, and in later years, Dr. Smegta and Dr. Zelklitz crafted a systematic archaeobotanical evidence analysis procedure in the 1990s, whilst in between Dr. Resnick, Dr. Fietz, and Dr. Dahal also made innovations in 1904, 1941, and 1958 respectively. And during that intervening period, the bare bulwarks of archaeobotany as a scientific discipline within the Czech Republic was developed by Dr. Emanuel Oberville in 1961. This was succeeded by Dr. Vera Kolchaka and in the 1990s by Dr. Peter Kotar. Shortly after, in the year 2000, the Laboratory of Archaeobotany and Paleoecology was developed. Most of the common spices grown within the Czech Republic have different origins. The researchers in this paper have cataloged all the data regarding the different origin points of different species, starting with the spices gained from Asia. Spices that were obtained from Asia were lovage, basil, black pepper, nutmeg, and cardamom. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the decay and restructuring of different business networks were developed between Europe and India, and quite early on medieval society coveted the spices that were found within ancient Roman times, and the continuous return to knowledge regarding black pepper found in Greek and Roman culture was re-established. The wisest individuals of that era often referenced Pliny the Elder of the 1st century and Gallienus of the 2nd century, as well as Isidore of Seville of the 7th century and Avicenna of the 9th century. From the 12th century onward, long cruises in the Mediterranean reopened and a spice trade was taken over by the Venetians, during which time they imported pepper, wax, sandalwood, and ginger from India to the east. In return, they exported metal and other finished products to India. This alliance between the East and the Venetians allowed for a larger number of merchant ships to develop. Indeed, at the apex, the Venetians had 3,300 large merchant ships for huge commercial production and distribution of pepper and other exotic commodities. This saw the beginning of a greater mode of commerce within Venice, as well as the development of banks and the greater specialization of the economy. Due to the expansion of the Ottoman Empire, which initially placed trade blocks within the Middle East, the pepper trade process slowed down, causing a gradual decline in the Venetian pepper market. Seeing a weakness, the Portuguese found another way to move pepper from one location to another through the circumnavigation of Africa, allowing the Portuguese to take over. This led to a spiraling war for control over India, or more specifically control over pepper, which became more valuable than gold during that era. The oldest known examples of black pepper in Czech lands came from 19 localities, the oldest of which are from the 13th century AD, found in Litvil and Prague. It, however, was not black pepper, it was white pepper. Nutmeg is the next herb on our hit list. Nutmeg was introduced to Europe by Arabian merchants based on written documents that date back to the 6th century AD. Like pepper before, during the Middle Ages, nutmeg, amongst many other goods, were controlled by the Venetians, and the price for the spice was very high, and during the Renaissance the price was not lower. The spice trade was then taken over by the Portuguese in 1514, when the Malacca Islands were discovered, and that monopoly was then taken over by the Dutch Indian Company to create a brand new monopoly which caused the prices to remain high. The French then gained ceilings and started their own cultivation of nutmeg in other tropical areas, as did the English, during the 18th and 19th centuries, which had a hand in reducing the prices. Nutmeg is said to have been transported to the Czech lands from Italy across Germany and Austria. Matoi also wrote several different herbal books about the different types of nutmeg, specifically differentiating the male and the female plants from each other, and recommended nutmeg as a means to treat headache and stomachache. It was also often mixed into wine and abused for its high that this herb can cause. Findings of nutmeg are quite rare within the archaeological evidence, and the earliest known evidence of Czech nutmeg dates back to the 14th century. In a dig site in Berun, another find was found in the vault backfill in the Prague castle, and it dates back to the 16th century. The next herb on our hit list is cardamom. The earliest written records of the transport of cardamom to Greece can be found in the work of Theophrastus, which dates back to the 4th century BC. Both Greeks and Romans utilized cardamom as a means of making perfume. Different merchants began moving cardamom into Mediterranean countries, such as Spain, and even further into Europe. The Vikings were also aware of this herb, as they obtained it from Constantinople around 1000 AD. In Czechoslovakia, cardamom was known about since medieval times, and was grown in Calicut, Malabar, and Java during that time period. Dr. Matoi stated that it was first transported to Europe from Alexandria, and had 3 different variants, small, medium, and large. The largest type of cardamom was the most popular one in the Czech region, and was called Grana Paradisi due to its unique taste and smell. The small, medium, and large cardamom are actually 3 different species, and the one that became most often used within the Czech Republic was Aphronum melguta. Cardamom was a valued spice, and is mostly found in archaeobotanical dig sites that are associated with high social status. The earliest record we have in Europe of cardamom is in Germany in the 12th century. It has also been found in Poland, in dig sites that range between the 15th and 17th century, and in the Czech region. The first and only find so far of cardamom comes from Prague. This dates back to the 17th to 18th century. It was found in a latrine of the College of the Fames Order. From the perspective of the New World crops, allspice is one of the major ones within the Czechoslovakia region. It was first used by the Aztecs, as far as we know, to spice their chocolate, and was introduced to Europe shortly after the discovery of the American region. It was unknown when it was first used within herbariums. The first records begin in the 17th century, and the biggest importers were Spaniards, and based on current records, during that time period allspice became a rather popular spice within European cuisine, both in the use of creating meat preservatives, sauces, and marinades. The name allspice comes from the term meaning that it tastes like 3 different spices: clove, cinnamon, and nutmeg. Based in archaeobotanical records, there are 2 instances of allspice remnants being found in dig sites. One is dated back to the 15th century, and the other to the 17th or 18th century. Lastly, we'll talk about Capsium annuum, the most popular New World spice within the Czech Republic during that era. It became predominant within the 1500s. Specifically, it was mentioned that there are extensive plantains of pepper in 1585 in the Czech city of Brno. 2 different types of pepper are found there. They're called Turkish pepper and Indian pepper. They were grown as both ornamental plants and as spices, and were used historically for medicine purposes as well as drying for making spice dishes. The earliest known examples of peppers within the archaeological dig site dates back to 4 different spots within Prague that date back to the 16th century. 2 others were found in a mining town dated between the 17th and 18th century. Most of these herbs and spices were found in dig sites related to the royalty, the wealthy, and the nobility. Most merchants at that time were traders of all sorts of goods, both pedestrian and exotic. And it's likely that spices of that nature were only a small amount of the income they made. However, other writings have found that there's actually 2 different groups of spices. One's called the ratibus, which included pepper, ginger, cloves, cinnamon, licorice, anise, mace, caraway, and saffron, i.e. exotic spices from other locations. The other group was called the fermento, which included European natives such as horseradish, hops, dill, and parsley. It is likely that merchants sold both types, the exotic stuff to the rich and the domestic stuff to everyone else. Indeed, exotic plants during that time period represented the person's material and spiritual wealth, which is represented by this painting quite well, seen on the bottom of the screen. The main exporter of spices was Italy during the 16th century, using the Danube region as a main port. In smaller towns, most of the spices were local species like chives, caraway, hop, juniper, mint, horse mint, lemon thyme, or middle-class type herbs found in the Mediterranean such as black mustard, celery, dill, fennel, bay leaf, lavender, cress, marjoram, lemon balm, love mist, oregano, parsley, anise, rosemary, sage, summer savory, and thyme. Most of the exotic spices, however, fell in the purview only of the aristocrats. And that about covers everything. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching this video. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to me on BitChute for a greater variety of content, 4 videos a week. And thank you to all my subscribers on both platforms. I appreciate it.